Hi there! Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jana June, and I like to make stuff. I'm a sewist with a garment and costume making background, and today I'm going to be showing you my process of making a ribcage corset. I've seen many an adaptation of ways to make these, and I wanted one for myself. I start out mostly following a tutorial by Vicious Frockery, linked below, but I also kind of went off and did my own thing. Before we get started, I'd like to thank you all so much for the response to my reversible dress video. The comments have been so sweet and encouraging, and I hope to continue making videos that you enjoy. Alright, enough being sappy, let's get started. I start by putting together Vicious Frockery's pattern here. I'm just using regular craft glue, but you can also use tape. I prefer using glue because you can kind of slide the paper until it's in the perfect spot before it dries. I think something must have gone wrong with my print settings because the other set did not line up properly. It looked like I would have to fill in an inch between the pieces to make them line up. I decided that since I would be adjusting this pattern anyway, I was just going to work with the right side pieces and then copy them later to get the left side. According to Vicious Frockery's tutorial, he recommends using the slash and spread technique to add width to the front if you need it. I felt like I needed to add about an inch or so to each side. I cut a slightly angled line a couple inches from the center front and spread open the pattern piece. I put a piece of paper underneath, taped it on one side, measured the distance, and taped down the other side. I'm now using tracing paper to trace the whole piece so I can change the rib lines that no longer line up. The top half was easy to freehand, but I needed to pull out a curved ruler for the lower ribs. I just move it around until I get a shape that blends both sides together. After finishing tracing the front and back, I flip them upside down to get a mirrored pattern piece and label them left and right. I'm now pinning them onto my dress form, and I decided to fold in the bust dart instead of utilizing the dart drawn on the pattern. I think I ended up pretty much putting them in a similar spot as the original, but I wanted to see how it fell in my form and work with it that way. I did end up dropping the back piece lower, which ends up making the arm opening larger. I'm glad I did this because honestly, I would probably make this opening even bigger if I were to remake this for the sake of comfort under my arms. I made the same adjustments to the other side, and now I'm ready to start my base. The next steps of the process sound easy, but they are so time consuming. I'm using a 12 gauge wire, I think, and I had a 10-meter roll. I just barely had enough for this project. What I'm doing is kind of estimating how much I need for a section and adding some extra to wrap on itself. I made the outer frame pieces first and used a few pins to try to keep it in place on my form. I quickly realized the amount of wire wrapping I was doing would mean I didn't have enough wire, so for all the ribs I decided to shorten the amount of wire to wrap around and used electrical tape to help keep it in place and soften the wire edges. Yes, I'm using little craft scissors to cut the wire instead of wire cutters because I couldn't find them, and this wire was soft enough for this to work. This took a while, but I finally had one side done and tried it on. seemed to fit all right, although I think I should have made it a bit bigger. I wasn't about to start over, and I was fine with leaving a large opening at the back, so I went with it and made it all over again on the left side. So I've been kind of sick for the past couple days from getting my booster shot, which means I'm way behind schedule. I need to pretty much finish this entire project today to be any semblance of on track, especially because I have a much more in-depth costume that I have a lot of work to do on in the next week. So I put on a full little dark fairy elf type vibe today to make myself feel more alive, and I'm gonna get to work. So what I'm doing is using this quilt batting. I don't know what I have it left over from, but I cut it into anywhere from 1 to 2 inch strips so that I can wrap it around all the individual ribs to add a little bit of bulk, make it look a little more like bones. And then I have all of these different laces. I got these all from Austin Creative Reuse, and they are super cool. If you don't know Austin Creative Reuse, it's an awesome nonprofit, basically like craft thrift store. It's amazing. I also have to avoid it so I don't spend too much money there, but at the same time, if you spend too much money there, you don't feel bad. I'll be using my hot glue gun here to wrap the batting around, hot gluing it every so often to keep it in place. Then I will use a white fabric to wrap around, and then different laces to give it lacy bones. Here you can see my process. I kind of had to angle and change directions at the corners, so I would add some glue there to keep the batting in place. This is how it looks after wrapping the entire wire base. The next step is using this matte satin fabric that I cut into strips to do the exact same thing. Fortunately, this fabric had a lot of fraying issues and I had to burn the edges, but this is how it looked after all that. And now, on to the lace. I put base layers of white down and used the more ivory tones over top in some sections to add dimension. I used a long piece of lace to weave through the front and connect the two sides, and a white satiny cording trim for my stash to lace up the back instead of making the lace up back piece that the tutorial recommends because I realized I didn't need it, and I really didn't want to spend more time on it at this point. So I did wear my skeleton ribcage corset in this state while in New Orleans for Halloween. Got all dressed for a show one night, and I did propose to my now fiance. I used these little till death necklaces, so I figured the skeleton look was definitely the way to go. And it was very cute, very lovely. She was very happy, had a great time. But I still feel like the corset is missing a few elements. It might need a little bit more lace, but I really want to add this sort of like anatomical, hopefully mostly beaded, encrusted kind of heart. I feel like that's gonna really take it to the next level. So that's what I'm gonna work on today. I ended up not really adding much more lace. I just kind of made sure everything was secure and moved on to the heart. I have this red faux suede, and I'm using a heat erasable pen to sketch out the shape while laying it on top of the ribcage to estimate the scale. I cut it out with a small seam allowance and added some veins before moving on to the rhinestones and beads. I glued purple rhinestones onto the veins and outlined a couple other spots with them. I used my dark red beads for the top section of the heart. I go through the beads with thread twice to help keep them in place and eventually wrapped thread around some beads horizontally to help secure them. The outside sections I outlined with dark pink beads but decided to fill them in with pink rhinestones because I wanted to even out some of the weight from the top being fully beaded. I put a layer of E6000 fabric fused glue in some small sections at a time to place rhinestones on top of. In the middle sections, I started to ombre it from pinks to mostly red. I wanted to make this stuffed, so it had a little bit more of a three-dimensional feel. So I'm sewing right sides together, the front and back, leaving an opening kind of like a pillow. This wasn't a perfect solution. I kind of had to undo some of it because there's some tight corners here, and then hand stitch it by wrapping around the edges. I filled it up with some fabric scraps that I cut down to small pieces and added a pin back so I can put it on anything I want. Okay, I love it, and I'm really glad I do because this was way too much work for me to hate it. I went into this really thinking that it was like one of my easier costumes for the year, and while it's not necessarily difficult technically, it is fiddly and definitely time consuming. What do you think? Are you thinking about making one of these for yourself? What colors or fabrics would you use? I really want to do a fully beaded version one day. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I make sewing, crafting, costume type content. Currently working on a very sewing heavy video which includes a corset and trousers, so keep your eye out for that. If you want to see what I'm up to in the meantime, feel free to follow me over on Instagram at jana.june. And that's everything. I'm Jana June, and I'll see you soon. Alright, enough with being sappy. Being sappy. I'm gonna coin that.